Gardener's World has grown to a full hour, giving us even more time to celebrate the very best of British gardening. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now, I reckon that the end of September is the end of the gardening year, and tomorrow is a New Year's Day for us gardeners. So let's celebrate. Let's celebrate with some bright, brash, audacious colour. And these dahlias are supplying that in spades. So the light may be waning, but we are not going gentle into any kind of night. And of course, in purely practical terms, if you keep cutting the flowers of dahlias in particular, but anything at this time of year, you are promoting new flowers, new buds, and as long as the weather doesn't get too cold, these will go on flowering for weeks to come in our new gardening year. On tonight's programme, Frances Tophill goes out on a limb in Cornwall.
This is just a light bit of weeding for
Absolutely,
you, is it?
Yes. Extreme gardening.
Yes.
Joe Swift is in Scotland, rediscovering the rockery.
Rockeries were popular with the Victorians and the Edwardians who wanted to grow and show off the exquisite little plants that were being discovered in the mountainous regions from all over the world.
And Flo Headlam transforms a derelict garden in Lewisham.
I need to get busy.
And we'll also be catching up with Adam Frost's progress in his garden in Lincolnshire. I'm going to be adding a few last splashes of colour into my jaw garden and planting up an alpine trough. I've got some Nepeta plants here that have done really well. They're looking fine at the moment and not dominating because I cut them right to the ground in early August. And when they're growing and they're full sort of performance in June, they're right up here. This is a variety called Six Hills Giant, and it is pretty big. Now, it's lovely, and I don't want to get rid of it, but I do want to divide it and move it around. And it's quite a good time to do it now because you can see how big it is. If you leave things till either the winter or early spring, before they start to grow, you can't really get an idea of how much space it's going to occupy. Move things now, and you can really see the effect that they'll have. This here is one plant. So if I dig that up, I can divide it. Cats find Nepeta irresistible, which is why it's known as catnip. And apparently it has narcotic influence on them. It's the chemical Nepeta lactone, and they absolutely adore it. However, by the same token, apparently rats and mice hate it, and so do mosquitoes and midges. So if you rub yourself with Nepeta, you won't get stung by mosquitoes, but you will get rubbed by cats. Now, I'm going to chop into that rather than trying to lift the whole thing. There we go. Right, that, you see, I could transplant lock, stock and barrel, which I'm going to do, so I'll put that in one shrug. But if I take this one out, I could divide it with my fingers like that, and now I've got two plants. Herbaceous plants grow outwards, like a donut. So the outer reaches of it, the newest bits, are always more vigorous and healthier and stronger. And what you should do always is discard the centre, put that on the compost heap, and replant the outer segments. So we'll pop that back in the ground. Inevitably, that looks a bit floppy now. And I could cut it back hard, and then it won't regrow before next year. But that will be fine. And it gives me more plants to take to another part of the cottage garden where I think these are going to serve well, because I've got a companion in there which is too big and not wide enough, And this will just fill that gap more naturally. Right. This is a campanula called Pritchard's Variety. Fabulous, lovely blue flowers in July. But it grows to about 7-8 feet tall. And that's out of scale with the roses on either side of it and even the espaliers behind it. Everything else in the garden is dwarfed by it. So it's a lovely plant. I don't want to lose it, but it's in the wrong place. I'm going to dig that out and probably move it to the grass borders and replace it with Nepeta. Here we go. Moving plants at this time of year gets around the trauma that they undergo when they're in full growth, because there's very little growth at this time of year. And the idea in the long term is that the roots grow between now and, say, mid-November, get anchored in, get established, and they can support the top growth, which will really kick in from April, May onwards. That will hardly know it's been moved, and I'm sure will fit into that space better. And the campanula will be able to hold its own when I plant it amongst the tallest of the grasses in the grass borders. Now, this kind of rearranging of plants, of designing and moving, is common to anybody who has a garden, whether it's a small urban backyard or rolling country acres. But occasionally, you do come across gardens that stand outside any kind of common experience. And in the first of 3 films, Francis Tophill visits a cliffside garden near Penzance in Cornwall.
Many of us gardeners often feel that we have a battle on our hands, whether it's damp, shady spots or slugs and snails, aphids, but very few of us will ever have to use one of these, a winch, or deal with something like this. You ready, Robert?
Yep.
This is one of the steepest gardens I've ever seen. Do you often use a winch?
We pull most of our shrubs and trees out with a winch because it takes the roots out. Generally, it's much easier than digging,
Well, I can
especially
see
on a
that.
slope like this.
This is a revelation to me. It's an extreme way of doing it, but it's actually extremely effective too.
There. Soil's off, and most of the roots are out.
Well, that is one way to do it.
I think we'll leave it where it is and go for a walk around the garden, have a little bit of a relax.
Sounds good to me. Basically a cliff, really, you're gardening
Yes,
on.
we are on a cliff. It's 3 acres, but we only garden 2.
Is it difficult to garden?
Yes. It is, but because we've terraced it, we've made it easier. You can stand and rest on the paths,
Okay.
and then you go up into the beds to do whatever you need to do.
Aside from that, you must have other slightly kind of challenging conditions.
Well, the soil is very poor, and that suits the plants that we grow. They like low nutrient conditions, so that's fine. The sea is very close, so we get salt spray, so that doesn't do things any good either.
Right. And wind, I mean, I imagine.
Well, the wind
Storms and gales.
from the
yeah.
east
Yeah.
and from the north.
So you basically have it all, really, don't you?
We
Yes.
do.
But you still
yes.
manage to grow some
Yes.
lovely species, which is
That's
nice.
right.
And this is a particularly favourite part of the garden. The alstroemeria and the crocosmia and the euphorbia, all flowering together. And
Lovely and bright colours as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see there's erigeron sort
Yes,
of everywhere. Is
Oh,
that
yes,
is that a
yeah.
favourite plant to
it
you?
is
is.
everywhere, yes,
yes.
yes.
It goes so well with the granite.
Yes.
It really
yeah.
is very,
Useful,
very.
yeah.
Ooh, that way.
Turn around and come down backwards.
Yeah. This is just a light bit of weeding for you, is it?
Just
For
a bit of
you.
light weeding. No, we don't do this very often, but a couple of times a year when we have to take out the bramble, and this makes all the difference because you've got your feet on the ground, you're steady, safe,
Yeah.
and you can weed easily.
So you need a bit of a head for height then.
You do.
It's quite fun though.
It
quite
is
a
great,
novel
isn't
way
it?
of doing it.
Absolutely. Yes, extreme gardening.
These rocks are incredible.
Oh,
aren't
they're
they?
absolutely wonderful, aren't they? Yes, quite fantastic. We had to uncover them, but once we did, then we realised we needed a path through here.
Well, I was
and
going to say the
a
terrain
little
working
bridge.
around this must
Yeah.
be really hard. But do you actually garden here?
Yeah, we do garden a little. I mean, a lot
Yeah.
of this is self-sown, but we've got this miniature gunnera, which is,
That's
well,
amazing, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, when you
So
think
small.
when you think of gunnera, it's a great, enormous thing.
That big thing that if
Yeah.
it was here by water,
Yeah.
it would be taking over
Yeah,
everything,
that's
as you've
right,
seen.
yes.
So is this the lowest part of the garden?
Yes, this is as far down as we garden. It's shady, it's damp,
Yeah.
it's perfect for tree ferns. In fact, they do so well that they spore everywhere, and we get thousands and thousands of baby tree ferns, which go off into the trade.
Oh, really?
So you probably, if you buy one, may very well have come from this garden.
That's amazing.
Yes, yeah.
So having walked down all of this way, how on earth do you get all this stuff, gravel and everything, down this far? Is it with a wheelbarrow?
No, we can't use a wheelbarrow. We send it down pipes.
Oh, wow.
And the pipes go about a third of the way down. So to get down to here, we probably have to move the hopper 3 times. So it keeps us pretty fit.
I'm only halfway up the garden. The house is way up there. And the bottom is somewhere far down there. And I can't imagine gardening this on a daily basis. Just the two of them coming up and down these paths with compost and plants and tools. It must be absolutely exhausting. Well, thank you very much for showing me around. It's been a very steep learning curve.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to have you here. We've enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. But there is one thing I'm worrying about. I know now how to get everything down, but how on earth do you get it all back up again?
Here you are. I'll give you this.
Okay.
And I'll show you. There's a little trick we learnt in Nepal,
Okay.
which does make a big difference to carrying stuff up. And that is, you get a bag like this, put it over your shoulder, on your forehead, and then off you go.
Come on, Ronnie.
Wow. Robert and Carol certainly have their work cut out here, but it's a fantastic garden. And it certainly is on the edge in every way.
But a garden doesn't have to be on a sheer rocky slope to capture the spirit of the mountains and the plants that thrive there. This summer, Joe Swift set out to uncover some of our most outstanding rock gardens. And in the first of a new series, he visits Branklin in Perthshire.
We fell out of love with the rock garden around the mid-1970s, along with shag pile carpets and avocado bathroom suites. And the reason for that, I think, was that we lost the original concept of what they were all about. They became a fad. People had to have them, so they started piling up soil in the corner of their garden, chucking a few rocks on, and creating something that resembled a giant currant bun. Now, I want to show you over the next few weeks that rock gardens don't have to be how we remember them. This year, more than 80 huge pieces of rock were seen at Chelsea Flower Show, and countless smaller ones too. Now, many of them were in gold medal winning gardens, such as Cleve West's Exmoor inspired garden and Andy Sturgeon's Best in Show. Now, we don't all want dramatic slabs of granite, but even on a smaller scale and with complementary planting alongside, they can make a stunning garden feature. Rockeries were popular with the Victorians and the Edwardians, who wanted to grow and show off the exquisite little plants that were being discovered in the mountainous regions from all over the world. Now, the challenge for gardeners was to recreate the conditions in Britain where these plants would thrive. At their home in Scotland in the 1920s, Dorothy and John Renton set out to build a series of rock gardens that would support their growing collection of exotic plants from the four corners of the globe. Branklin has been nurtured by head gardener Steve McNamara for the past 20 years. So Steve, how did the Rentons go about creating this rockery?
Well, they started off when they first came here in the 1920s, and they got all the rocks from Knoll Hill, which is just behind us, and brought them down by a steam engine. And then they had to manhandle everything in here to lay it out. It's well drained, it's loamy, you know, the type of soil was really good here, so it made a great place for a rockery, actually.
We're a little bit late in the season for the Alpines.
Yeah.
But there's still plenty going on here.
Still
Lots in
plenty
flower,
of
isn't
colour.
there? Lovely little diorama here.
Yeah, we now grow the much shorter ones, and it's more appropriate, really, for a rockery. And we've got the likes of Bulbinella, Mucorrea, the Maori onion, it's called.
I love that.
Obviously, it's happy and it's growing like mad, you know.
And what's this one here? The green carpet.
That is the vegetable sheep, Raulia hastii. You can see the way it grows over the rocks and everything. It's a lovely thing, actually. People are fascinated because it's rock hard, you know, if you touch it.
It's fantastic. It's like a miniature landscape all of its own. So it's not just Alpines here. You got plants from all over the world.
Yeah.
You're not snobby or a purist about it.
No, I mean, the Rentons just collected plants from all over, and of course they were just interested in growing them, and you know, you can grow what you like as long as you got the right conditions.
I see you've got lots of these planters sort of knocking around the place, haven't you? I really like these. I have to say, these stone containers with the moss and the lichen.
Fantastic, aren't they?
They feel like they've been here forever, but I guess they're a great way of getting, you know, a mini rockery into a smaller garden. Not everybody's got acres of the stuff.
No, that's right. So this is a bit more manageable.
So you don't feed these plants a lot. Is it getting some minerals from the rock itself?
Minerals from the rock. If you think of a scree slope, you know, all the rocks there, not much soil, but there's loads and loads of minerals, and that's what we're giving it here. You know, all this gravel is giving it minerals. Again, you're trying to sort of emulate the slope of a mountainside, and okay, it's a little vignette of it, but it's still quite effective, you know.
Come on. Well, of course, I'm old enough to remember when rock gardens were very much the rage, but it is funny how they went completely out of fashion. But I'm glad they're coming back. They're fabulous, and they're interesting, and we should relish them. And you don't need to have a great big rock garden to enjoy rock plants. They look very, very good in stone troughs or pots. Now, I've got a couple of troughs, and I originally planted them up in the cottage garden about 3 years ago. And then last winter, when we had a really wet winter, I couldn't work out why everything was dying. Cut a long story short, we looked and lifted it and found that the central plug had been blocked, and basically the plants drowned. They can take any amount of cold, they can take any amount of sunshine, but they cannot take sitting in the wet. So drainage is paramount, and if you give them that, they're fine. So a big drainage hole, I've made some extra ones, but as long as that doesn't get blocked, that shouldn't be too bad. So I'm going to cover that over, and I'm going to put some grit in the bottom. Because what I don't want is the roots to come down and then sit in a puddle. For the actual compost mix, you cannot be too well drained. I've got our standard mix here, which has peat-free compost mixed with our garden compost, a little bit of soil, a little bit of leaf mould, and some grit. And I'm going to add to that 50-50 pure grit. But, the plants. One of the many lovely things about alpine and rockery plants is they tend to be quite cheap. And you can buy all kinds of different ones without breaking the bank. A little saxifrage, like this one, Whitehill, which has beautiful little white flowers on delicate long stems, is perfect. Absolutely perfect. Now, this is an Andrasace, very happy in these conditions. And you can see it's got these extraordinary sort of floral type foliage. But in fact, there are pink flowers that will come up through. Now, an awful lot of alpine plants flower in spring, but the erodiums will start to flower in June and go on right into autumn. Very common sedums, but you know, there's nothing wrong with being common. That can go over the edge. So we've got plenty of flowers. More erodiums. Of course, it's always an arrangement with any container. That's better. That's more like it. Now, planting them, of course, is easy. The fact they're sitting a bit proud also doesn't matter, because I'm going to top this up with grit. Okay, that's an initial planting, and I'm going to add to that with some bulbs. There are a whole range of minuscule alpine bulbs that you can get. And I've got two, but this is a tulip, Iliensis, which has got little yellow flowers. So we can put that in there. And these will flower March, April time, quite early as tulips go. Now, I've got a daffodil here, and I don't want any sniggering at the back. We're all grown up. This is Narcissus Assoanus. See? Easy. And it's beautiful. It's got little yellow flowers, and it's a tiny little daffodil. That can pop in there. So we've got spring flowers, summer flowers, even some autumn flowers. And the final thing to do is I'm going to dress it with some grit. It will again improve the drainage, but also stop any splashing. These are very delicate flowers. So if you do get heavy rain and you've got soil and compost in there, they get splashed. Finally, just because they hate sitting in water doesn't mean to say that they don't need water. So water them in really well. There we are, music to my ears. Really good drainage. The fact that water is running through the bottom means that they won't get waterlogged. Now, this kind of gardening is very particular, very precise. But sometimes you just have to roll up your sleeves and get stuck in. And that's what Flo Headlam has been doing in Lewisham.
The RHS Greening Great Britain campaign has discovered that 1 in 4 gardens in the UK is paved over. But it doesn't have to be this way.
Today I'm in South London to tackle a front garden that's been unloved and forgotten for far too long. I need to get busy.
The garden belongs to Nisha McGregor, and I know she's desperate for some help.
So how long have you lived here, Nisha?
I've been here for just over 10 years now, actually.
And tell me about the garden.
The front garden.
The front garden.
Well, it's been a bit of a battle between me and the weeds.
Yeah.
So that was my first thing. I thought if I can get on top of the weeds, then I could maybe inject some life into it. But it's been really difficult.
And shade as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the other side of the street gets all the sun. I only get sun on my part of the garden first thing in the morning, and then it's gone.
So it is a challenge because we're on a north-facing site. However, I think my main thing is evergreens. I'm passionate about evergreens. I'm a champion of evergreens. So I'm thinking evergreens, and I'm thinking some plants with coloured foliage to bring a colour palette.
Oh, good.
You know, well, give me a few hours and come back. I'll get to work. See you later. Well, I better crack on. I'm going to be busy, obviously, clearing all this stuff, and then I can weave my magic. I need to see what's underneath that membrane. Well, this is what I thought I would find, perennial weeds, and in this case, bindweed. So the most important thing is just to get rid of as much as you can. I'm taking great care to dig out as many of these perennial weed roots as I can, and the more I dig out, the less will come back. Be thorough, it's worth it. So this little trick I love. I get a plank of wood, just the width of the bed, and you use it as a leveller. Right, I'm ready to plant my hedge now. After planting the boundary line hedge, I'm going to put down a brand new weed suppressant membrane and then position my star plants. This one here is my favourite plant. It's Pittosporum Tom Thumb. And then this one is another Pittosporum, and this one's Tandara Gold. And what I love about it is it's got a fine, airy quality, and it's got these beautiful mid-green and lime green leaves. And I just think it's beautiful and elegant and quite simple. Planting through a membrane, cut the membrane, obviously. Some people do a circle, I do a cross. So I open it up. Oh, and another tip is I dig a square hole for a round pot, so the plant has lots of room to spread its roots as it goes in. I'm going to add some bone meal, just a handful, sprinkled in like that, because that will help with the root development and give the plants the best start that they can have. And then I'm going to place my plant. Put all the soil back, make sure it's nice and compact, nice and firm, so you don't want any air pockets around the plant, so firm as you go down. All that's left for me to do is just to tidy up the soil, push the membrane back, and that's one Tandara Gold planted. I'm going to put all the soft plants, all the ground cover plants in position now before I plant up. All the plants I've chosen are good for shade. I've got ferns. I've got Alchemilla mollis, which has a beautiful lime green, sort of acid green flower. That sits really nicely with the heuchera, and they have really tall flower spikes as well, so gorgeous. And Liriope. So altogether, I think they work really well. It's a really good combination. They will brighten this spot and just add some really soft colour.
And I'm adding another burst of colour with this window box, which are planted with pink cyclamen, heather and variegated ivy.
Now the finishing touch is to add some gravel, just to make it beautiful and presentable. Well, that's it. The garden is complete. I hope Nisha likes it. Come and have a look. See what you think.
Oh my God, that's lovely. I can't believe this is my garden.
This is your garden now.
Oh my gosh. I would definitely be spending more time out here. I won't be scared to come out here because of the spiders and hiding under the weeds.
Here, you know, sit down.
Bit of Prosecco at the front. It's absolutely beautiful. It's elegant, sophisticated. It's just like you said. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's inspiring. It does show you that whatever the conditions, wherever you are, where there's a will, there is a way. I get a lot of questions and emails and letters from people about fruit. Now, this is a very typical email, which I've had from Dick Keeling in London. And he's sent me a picture here which shows a new branch covered with a kind of white woolly froth. And this is the protective layers around the woolly aphid. And the nymphs spin this material to stop birds eating them. Now, like all aphids, they are sap suckers. So they will suck the sap of the new shoots, where the bark is thin that they can get through. And that will slightly weaken the plant, but hardly at all. The important thing is it doesn't affect the flowering or the subsequent fruiting. And my attitude to this is that your garden is full of myriad small creatures, the vast majority of which do no harm. and you share your garden with them. In practice, the woolly aphid parents are now flying away. The nymphs may well overwinter in crevices in the bark. You can clear away the wool with a brush or with water, but best of all, you can not worry about it. Now, still to come on the programme, we rejoin Adam in his garden in Lincolnshire.
What I want to get done today is lay some little paths in here, something that actually I call picking paths.
And the garden designer Mark Lane shows us around his own garden in Canterbury.
It's really about just having fun and getting out there and having a go.
But first, earlier this summer, I paid a long overdue return visit to a garden that's tucked away in a leafy Dublin suburb. This garden is the life's work of the celebrated gardener and writer Helen Dillon, and is famous amongst plant lovers the world over. In the 25 years that it's been open to the public, it has inspired thousands of visitors with its variety of garden rooms, each filled with an array of beautiful and unusual plants, all surrounding the centerpiece, an elegant canal, flanked by borders plangent with colour. Helen, I came here 21 years ago, and this was lawn then.
That lawn was nurtured within an inch of its life. There was great obsession with this lawn, so I thought the best thing to do is that we take away the lawn and we'll make something terribly plain that nobody can be worried about. This slightly compensates for the confusion and all stuff at the
you
side.
call it it's this stuff, as you call it, the most incredible intensity of floriferousness.
I find colour terribly exciting, and it's not that's not fashionable at the moment. I mean, I do have people coming here and they've got their eyes nearly shut because the whole strain of looking at all this colour. And they say, I only want green and white, they say. I only want green and white. And I think, well, too bad. Or something ruder.
Yes, well, I suspect something ruder, and good for you. But I like colour too. And I think that it's the excitement and the energy of it.
It's the energy of them clashing with each other. I mean, you see that orange rose over there?
Yes.
That is absolutely oomph. It's called Warm Welcome. Yeah. Have you met it before?
No, but, to be truthful...
You can't stand it.
No, I can't stand it there. I tend to view orange roses with a great deal of suspicion.
Well, one does, but they illuminate the place for me.
Were you always a really keen gardener?
Really. Boringly keen. I've been gardening all my life. I love gardening.
Yeah.
Can't live without it, actually.
And what is it that drives you?
It's the only thing that makes me feel calm, relatively calm. It's a kind of playing. It's a kind of... I get lost in myself. It's the only thing I can lose myself in.
See, I like this idea of playing. I thought that gardening is grown-ups going outside to play.
That to me, it's exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. And I can remember just how I felt as I put in my first polyanthus, and I thought, God, that's gorgeous, isn't that gorgeous? And it was only one plant, one polyanthus. So, I mean, I get the same pleasure out of one polyanthus as all this. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same kick.
Where have you drawn your horticultural inspiration from?
God knows. I am not educated, my dear. I left school at 16. That was it. And so I suppose I'm educating myself. Non-stop reading, particularly old gardening books. And I've been terribly lucky in travelling in lots of places in the world to look at the plants.
But that's the lesson, isn't it? Trust yourself, trust your eyes.
Yeah, learn. And particularly go and look at what other people are growing, even if it's only just somebody in the next door village.
Yeah.
You get an idea. But longing for ideas, you can get very good ideas in very bad gardens.
There's something that I always feel is that wonderful plants can make bad gardens and boring plants can make good gardens.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah. This is a very sophisticated garden, you know, it's quite frankly grand. And yet you're happy to have dustbins and plastic pots and things on display. Why is that?
Well, I'm very keen on dustbins. Dustbins are excellent for growing roses.
Right.
Because you've got a deep root run.
Yeah.
They'll do for 5 years in a dustbin, provided you feed them. If all you've got room for is one bin, you can do a cracking good job. I'm doing a sort of mobile gardening thing, particularly with things like lilies, which look wonderful for 3 weeks. And there's no reason for them to block up a good bit of the border for the other 49 weeks. And to me, the garden was always a stage. It's a stage in which I am moving the players. And if I get bored of the player will just have to go and get on with it in the yard, quite frankly. And if it's a lovely player, it can come out to the front. It has to be a stage.
But all this is about to change. Because after 44 years spent creating and tending her masterpiece, Helen has decided that she needs a new challenge. So, you've made this intensely beautiful garden, and now you're going.
I know, because it's the time. I just want to go when I'm strong enough to go. And I used to think that I could watch it quietly fall to bits. I've now decided I can't do that. I'd rather leave it in its full glory and play at something new. I'll be making a new, very small garden, but I'm going to be thinking about it and enjoying it and changing it and just getting excited about it.
A lot of people would say that at a certain age, it's time to wind down and do less and not have less of a challenge. So where's that come from?
The whole joy is the challenge, you silly boy. Really. That is the fun, isn't it?
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. But Helen is not leaving everything behind. Some of her favourite plants will find a home in her new garden.
There's no point taking a plant that you can easily get. But there's great point in taking a plant like this, which is my favourite, slightly mauve, Melianthus major.
Well, it's distinctly mauve, isn't it? Gosh, it's...
And it gets more distinct as summer continues.
Has that Melianthus got a special name?
It's called Purple Haze.
OK, Purple Haze. So that's one. OK, another?
Step this way. So, Monty, what do you think of this spiky-looking customer?
It's very singular, is what I think.
It's Pseudopanix crassifolis from New Zealand. And the interesting thing is, it's evolved in that extraordinary form because it wanted to stop itself being eaten by the giant extinct bird. The grazing mower used to eat it. This plant, when it gets to about 15, it completely changes how it looks. And it ends up looking like that there.
It is amazing, isn't it, how evolution has enabled it to disguise itself.
I will be taking this with me because I love it.
Although Helen has spent more than half her life creating this garden, her eyes are fixed firmly on the future. What intrigues me listening and actually looking at you, at the twinkle in your eye, you don't seem upset by it, by leaving.
Because I'm excited about going. The creation is the excitement. Because there's no room to create anything here. I can't take that bed to bits. I actually think that's the best I can make that bed.
It's done.
It's done. It's done. And it's like painting a picture. I don't want to go on doing the same picture, coming down every morning, giving it another little spot there, another little bit of pink possibly there. I want a new picture.
I love seeing Helen's garden again, and one thing you can be sure, that if she paints a new picture, it may be a miniature compared to that, but it will be in its own way another masterpiece. Now, something that struck me very strongly about the way that Helen uses colour in her borders is she's constantly adding plants in, either in pots or on top of pots. And what I'm going to do is something that goes against most of the advice that I'd give you. Normally, I'd say look for small plants, particularly perennials. Don't buy plants in flower because they're spending energy that you want in your own garden. But I've been and found plants that are in full flower and got all the tones and colours I want to add to the garden. They are only going to stay in flower for a week or two at most. But it'll give me a chance to experiment with places to plant them to look best next year. It's a kind of dress rehearsal. So, for example, I've got this Helenium. It's called Mardi Gras. Lovely caramel orange colours coming through. And it fits in with the David Howard dahlias and the cannas and the sunflowers. But actually, if you analyse this section, this corner of the bed in the Jewel Garden, it's flat and green. And these Iris sibirica are not contributing much. But if I could get in there and add that in at that height, and one of the ways of doing it is to put a pot there like that. It lifts it, and if it grows into that, that's a good height. There's no point in propping up a plant that is never going to reach that final height. But if you can get a plant that's sort of half its size and then lift it up. That's a good indicator of where to plant it for next year. Or you can make a group out of it. And I bought these in threes because I'm looking for a hit of colour. And the point is, at this time of year, these plants will be fine in the small pots for the next 2-3 weeks. And if I like it, I can plant them in that spot. If on reflection I think it's not going to work, well, I simply just pick them up and move them. How's that looking? Yeah, that's much better. So we'll take that one out. I've got a Crocosmia, Harlequin, which has got exactly the same colour range as the Helenium Mardi Gras. You can see, I love Crocosmias anyway. And Lucifer, for example, is long over. That's the Crocosmia with bright, brilliant red. But some of them are much more subtle and flower later. See, I think that's great. So if I take another pot and pop that in here, pop that down. See, the colour is ideal. And the whole point about this is a great time of year to be planning for next July, August and September. Go and buy plants, move them around, get height, get texture, get colour, and you can see what they're going to look like. You can plant it and know next year at this time they will come up and they'll be in the right place, giving you the right colour, and that is a real advantage. Now this is fine-tuning, it's finessing an existing garden to try and get it as good as it can be every single day of the year. Whereas for Adam, in his new garden in Lincolnshire, he's still very much at the stage of creating from the ground up.
It's mid-August and I've just returned from that family holiday. The feeling though when you get back home in your own garden is just wonderful. I think in the UK, if we've got the weather, I don't think there's anywhere more beautiful in the world, and out early in the mornings, walking around this space here that I'm calling the meadow area, around the back end of the woodlands, is beautiful. But I wanted to get into this area, so all I did was took a lawnmower, cut these paths through. It's already got structure in here, so these brilliant old shrubs. So I've got that scent from Philadelphus, lilacs, but then I've got the edibles, the sorbus, and even the hawthorn. You know, they used to eat the leaf and the flower and call it bread and cheese. A bit bitter for me, but I love those little stories. So I've been out taking pictures in the lanes, and I'm really going to start to work out what are those plants we can use to bring into this meadow that are edible. I think what I'll do in the winter is literally lift the canopies, and then I can start to add these edible plants all the way through. At the moment, I'm really chuffed to bits with the progress of my veg garden. The base for the greenhouse is coming along and the cooking area is done. The 2 sets of Weatherstill planters are in place and all my raised beds are looking great. Most of the hardcore base for the paths is down. Now I just want to add a few really useful design details. What I want to get done today is lay some little paths in here, something that actually I call picking paths. Sometimes when you create a bigger bed, you can't actually get in there, so I can't get into weed, I can't get into pick, the goodies that are going to come off the bed. And what I don't want to be doing is trampling all over this bed, taking the mud on my boots, across the gravel and across the rest of the garden. So the idea is the big long paths that go in between the gravel beds, they run straight through these beds. I'm going to use a mix that's 6 part ballast and 1 part cement for the footings. The bricks for the path are 60mm deep and they sit on a 10mm bed. So I need to establish some pegs that sit at 70mm below the finished level of the path. These pegs set my levels as I'm laying my concrete mix, but they will stay in place once the footing's set. And all I'm doing is finding the top of those pegs. You know then that it's not only going to give you something firm to build off, but it's not going to go anywhere. Just check that it's going to fit. There you go, brick's going to be level across the top. Fingers go in, which means I can get a nice bed all the way through. You're probably thinking actually that's an awful lot left to go to for a tiny little bit of pathing. But actually I don't want it to move. I can put the bricks straight on top of the soil, and the soil gets wet, I pull some vegetables up and everything's moving all over the place. So I think, do you know what, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing right. The mortar needs at least 24 hours to set, but I won't be sitting around waiting. There's plenty of jobs to be cracking on with. Today my boys Jacob and his younger brother Oakley need a hand with some new arrivals.
Right, here we go. All right, mate. Look, little blue one. So these two think they're going to be businessmen, so they're going to set themselves up a little business. So as far as selling the eggs, they've already sort of made their brand, they've got their boxes. He's going to make some little flyers, take them into school. I think it's a great way for the youngsters not only to understand where their food comes from, but that responsibility of looking after something, which I think is great. And obviously make their old man a millionaire.
Since I've returned from holiday, I've put together a full planting plan for the new foraging border in the front garden.
Give you some idea actually about how I approach planting design really. First of all, I actually choose more or less like a palette. So I look at the plants that I want to use, make sure they all grow well in the space. Sometimes when I'm designing, I have a word floating around in my head. Well, this one, you know, is food, it's foraging, but exotic. It creates a certain atmosphere for me. The next thing I do is I start to put in my trees and my large shrubs. And you'll see that these are worked all the way through the space. I'm going to need that height. I'm going to need something to break the sky and actually break one area to the next area.
The Taxus domes I planted when we first moved in have really bounced back, and they're providing the framework for the rest of the structural planting.
So the next thing will go in will be my smaller shrubs. And you'll see from the colours on my plan that I like to actually repeat a certain shrub here, and I'll repeat it a little bit further up the border. Then the herbaceous plants go in. And that's really my border put together. And my last little bit that I love doing is what I call drift planting. So you'll see these big old shades of planting, and it's more or less if I just go and they're self-seeded over. They're the ones that give me that natural feel and that feeling that this garden really wants to take on a sort of a life of its own.
While Adam's garden is still very much work in progress, the garden designer Mark Lane has created a space that is both beautiful and works well for him. And earlier this summer, he showed us around.
As a garden designer, but also as a gardener, here in my own garden, it's a perfect playground for me to experiment with choice of materials, as well as plants and different plant combinations. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's really about just having fun and getting out there and having a go. I love this small border. It's actually a range of pinks. It's my rose and peony border. And here we have Rose Princess Anne, and it's still in full flower. And right in front of me is Hydrangea paniculata Vanille Fraise, and then behind the Japanese anemones. Now, this front part of my garden is probably about 1/3 of an acre, so it's a large area, and we don't have an endless pot of money. So we've actually used gravel underfoot. Now, gravel, some people think, well, that's not a very good material to use, especially for people in wheelchairs. But if you actually lay it right, it can really work well. If you tamp down a good type 1 base and then tamp down granular, angular gravel on top of that, and then dress it with a finished layer, you get a very solid surface. And then as you come up, we've used gravel boards as edges. I've used a fence capping on top. Now that does two things. One, well, I think it looks great, but it also hides a white LED strip light all the way around, and that goes around the whole of this part of the garden. So at night time, the whole borders just lift and they look like they're floating on top of the pale gravel. And then as we come up from the gravel boards, we have these lovely green low hedges. Now this is Ligustrum ovolifolium, which is a large leaf privet. Some people might shy away from privet, thinking it's a bit ugly compared to box. But when I tell you that it comes in at about 1/3 of the price, and actually might need a bit more trimming than box, it still creates a wonderful dense hedge. And if you're actually worried about the size of the leaf, I mean, that's quite a large leaf, you can go for the smaller leafed privet, Ligustrum delaveanum, or the Delave privet. And I've used that elsewhere on my lollipops, and they work brilliantly, and they look just like box. Go for privet, it's a good choice. I really love my blue and yellow border. It's just simplicity itself, just 2 colours. And here are some really great tips which I've learnt. Use big, bold drifts of colour, such as the yellow Rudbeckia, and then as a contrast, dotted amongst them are these jewels of blue from the aster and the agapanthus. Now, agapanthus are great plants to keep inside their pots because it actually constricts them and makes them flower more. And then the beauty of that is you can then pick that pot up and move it around your border to fill a space. And then behind me is the Achillea cloth of gold, which when you cut back at the end of May, around the Chelsea chop time, it allows the flowers to grow at different heights, giving a much more natural feel to the plant itself, and then gives a natural flow to the border. This is our white garden, and it's actually quite a new garden. It's only 5 months old, but it's already looking really full. People always think, well, white, is that really just it? Well, when you actually look at the plants, there are obviously different shapes and different forms. So you have the daisy heads of the cosmos, then you have these beautiful umbelliflors, which are quite flat on top, but they're made of tiny little pinheads. And when you put them together, they just work. I absolutely love this part of the garden. It's exuberant, it's colourful. I'm surrounded by it from every single angle. And it's plants, there's shrubs, there's grasses, there's trees, everything that forms a garden. And I just think it's incredible. It's like someone has lit a match inside of me and it's just growing. I just love this whole feeling that the plants are actually almost hugging me. And for me, that just gives me a great warmth inside.
You know, it doesn't matter how much you rationalise your planting or intellectualise the design of a garden. If it doesn't get you by the heart, it's not going to work. Now, what next? Oh, I know. Jobs. If you've got a bare piece of ground on your allotment or veg patch, it's too late to sow any seeds, but it's a good idea to cover the ground with a generous layer of compost. You don't need to dig it in, just leave it for the weather and worms to incorporate, and it'll be ready for use as soon as the ground warms up next spring. Now is a really good time to take salvia cuttings. Look for a nice strong shoot growing at 45 degrees between the main stem and a leaf. And as always, choose a shoot that does not have a flower bud. Pot them up with really well-drained compost, put them somewhere warm, water them well, and they should root and be ready for planting out next spring. It's Michaelmas and harvest time. And if you've put all the work and trouble into growing vegetables across the spring and summer, do be sure to harvest as many of them as you can. Well, I said that, for me at least, this is the last day of the gardening year. So let's see what our New Year weather is going to be like this weekend.
Hello. Well, I think the growing season's got a bit of mileage in it yet for most of us, but not the best of days for getting out in the garden tomorrow across a good part of England and Wales, with some pretty heavy rain moving in. Could be some thunder in the mix as well, but much of northern England, Scotland, Northern Ireland having a largely dry day, long sunny spells, but a hint of autumn in the air with top temperatures around about 13 to 15 degrees. Now, through Saturday night, we lose the rain. We also lose most of the cloud and the wind as well. That's a recipe for a cold night this time of the year. Frost looks likely across many parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps the northwest of England, Wales and the West Midlands too. So a chilly old start to Sunday, but this is the day for getting out and about. Bright, crisp blue skies, fairly light winds in most places as well, and temperatures around about the mid-teens, so not too far off the average for the early part of October. Looking ahead into next week, a lot of dry weather to come, more in the way of sunshine and gradually turning warmer again as well. So I think still a few more French beans to come, on my plot at least.
I know that some people find chard a little bit intimidating. Well, a very, very simple recipe that we've eaten here for years. This recipe, you just need the leaves. Just warm up a couple of tablespoonfuls of olive oil and gently warm it. You don't want it fizzing. And then a couple of cloves of garlic. Soften that in the oil. Now, at this time of year, we've got lots of fresh chilies. This is a jalapeno. But chili flakes will do just as well. There we go. Give that a gentle stir around. You don't want either the chili or the garlic to brown. It's just softening. Now, you've washed the chard. Just drain it lightly, and you want to keep some of the water. And then break it up a bit, pop that in, stir it around, and leave to cook. And the whole point about chard is it's like spinach. You know how you have that thing with spinach, you get a large pan and you cram it full of leaves, and it reduces to that much. Well, this will reduce to about that much. A bit of salt, and the juice of a lemon. Now, you can either serve this as a vegetable, or, as I like to eat it best of all, is as bruschetta. Just get some good bread. I like sourdough bread. Toast it, and then serve this on the bread. And it makes a really good starter. Right, let's let that cook a bit. I love this vegetable, and it's a great way to eat it. And we've been growing chard and eating it like this and other ways for the last 25 years, and I never get tired of it. But however you cook your vegetables, enjoy it. And I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next week. Till then, bye-bye.
Rav ran out of luck and said his goodbyes. Danny Baker says he should have stayed and joins Joe Brand for the Great British Bake Off An Extra Slice next here on BBC Two.
Gardener's World has grown to a full hour, giving us even more time to celebrate the very best of British gardening. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now, I reckon that the end of September is the end of the gardening year, and tomorrow is a New Year's Day for us gardeners. So let's celebrate. Let's celebrate with some bright, brash, audacious colour. And these dahlias are supplying that in spades. So the light may be waning, but we are not going gentle into any kind of night. And of course, in purely practical terms, if you keep cutting the flowers of dahlias in particular, but anything at this time of year, you are promoting new flowers, new buds, and as long as the weather doesn't get too cold, these will go on flowering for weeks to come in our new gardening year. On tonight's programme, Francis Tophill goes out on a limb in Cornwall.
This is just a light bit of weeding for you, is it?
Absolutely, yes. Extreme gardening.
Yes.
Joe Swift is in Scotland, rediscovering the rockery.
Rockeries were popular with the Victorians and the Edwardians who wanted to grow and show off the exquisite little plants that were being discovered in the mountainous regions from all over the world.
And Flo Headlam transforms a derelict garden in Lewisham.
I need to get busy.
And we'll also be catching up with Adam Frost's progress in his garden in Lincolnshire. I'm going to be adding a few last splashes of colour into my jaw garden and planting up an alpine trough. I've got some Nepeta plants here that have done really well. They're looking fine at the moment and not dominating because I cut them right to the ground in early August. And when they're growing and their full sort of performance in June, they're right up here. This is a variety called Six Hills Giant, and it is pretty big. Now, it's lovely, and I don't want to get rid of it, but I do want to divide it and move it around. And it's quite a good time to do it now because you can see how big it is. If you leave things till either the winter or early spring before they start to grow,